add value to your business, or do you want to just be this administrative person?
And often, if you look at your talent team and the caliber of talent in your company, they correlate.
You could hire the best person for the job if they were in your candidate pool.
All these individual employees, one by one, together, their voices all come together to articulate the culture of the company.
This is
Hiring on all cylinders.
Good morning, afternoon, and evening, recruiting pals. Rob Stevenson here again. Thank you so much for tuning back into Hiring on All Cylinders, and I have a special treat for you over the next few episodes. At this very moment, I am situated in my pop-up recording booth, at Fidelity Investments headquarters in Boston, Massachusetts, where we have agreed to be the podcast of record for our friends at Future Workplace. You may remember Future Workplace from Gene Meister, who we spoke to at HR Tech. They are an executive consultancy working with some of the most senior folks in HR, prepping them to tackle the complex issues of an ever-changing talent and recruitment landscape. So swarming around me are just all sorts of CHROs, VPs of talent, heads of recruitment, and so forth. And I'm going to be interviewing as many of them as I can over the next few days. The first of whom, Tara Amaral. She is a Senior Vice President of Talent Acquisition for Fidelity itself. Tara, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And also joining me is Entelo's very own VP of Talent and Operations, Jill Witty. Jill, glad you're here too.
Glad to be here, Rob.
So Tara, this event is far-reaching in terms of what it covers. It's not just recruitment, but talent acquisition is kind of your main focus. So what are you trying to bring back from the event that's specific to recruitment?
So one of the things we're trying to do is make sure that we're not just talking to ourselves in what we think is going on in talent acquisition. We do want to take into account our competitors and the marketplace and what trends are emerging that we may not know about. Wonderful.
And Jill, I know that you two were kind of picking each other's brains a bit before the networking session, which is how this all came about. What was that you guys were kind of chatting about?
So I was so fascinated to learn about one of the challenges that hadn't occurred to me, but that Fidelity faces being in the financial services industry is they tend to have an employee base that skews more male than their customer base. And I would say the same thing is true in tech. And, a lot of the companies we work with find this to be a challenge. So I loved a little bit of what I learned about Fidelity, what Fidelity has done to improve on that. So Tara, maybe you can tell us a little bit about one of the things that was most successful for you guys in recruiting more female applicants.
That's great. In one of our more numerous position, which used to be called a financial services representative, we noticed that in all of our locations, we were getting a very significant overflux of men who were applying for the roles. About 75% of the applicants were actually male. We know that in the financial services industry, there is so much of a wealth transfer to women that by 2020, the numbers will be about 90% of the assets are managed or touched by women, given the age and longevity. So we needed to know that we had to make sure that women felt comfortable with who they were dealing with. And they had already been telling us through customer focus groups that they weren't thrilled with the way that we were servicing them. So we really believe that our customer base should also mirror our employee base and vice versa. So we really want to take a little bit of a diagnostic, understand why aren't women applying. And we found out two things. One thing is exposure. And so we really wanted to understand what was the existing talent pool. And we found that in the industry, women in financial services licensed roles, 7 and 63, was less than 30% of the marketplace. So we knew we were getting our fair share of what was available. The problem was the market just isn't big enough. And so we had to think about ways to increase the pool of people that might be interested. The second thing was the way we talked about the job was very clinical. And we've been on a movement to make sure that we're talking in English to candidates. And so we had a cross-business Scrum team, which is agilely working at ways to improve the recruitment process. And they started tinkering with how we were talking about the roles that we had. And they made some pretty significant shifts over the last 6 months. We tried out all sorts of titles. The first thing we did was took out the word sales from the title, and we saw a little bit of a lift. Then we started to take out the acronyms and things that are common sense. But then we really kind of glammed onto the fact that at Fidelity we talk about relationships. And when we started testing some of the language around relationships and passion and loving what you do and being service-oriented, the team finally landed on a title called Customer Relationship Advocate. And what we found when we really introduced this and softened some of the phrasing and also opened up the type of skills that we were looking for, we had a doubling of the increase in the number of women that were applying. So we went from about a 25 or 26% percentage of the applicant pool up to almost 50%. And this was at all ranges of experience, from college to women that were in other industries and now looking to come over to financial services because we were putting more value on their service and emotional quotient than we were on whether or not they read the Wall Street Journal. And so it's had a significant shift in getting them to apply, and then we've also changed the entire interview process so that everyone on the limited interview team now is really aware of what we're looking for, which is, again, talking about relationships, passion, and helping people.
That's, first of all, doubling the percentage of women in your applicant pool for this particular role is amazing. I'm guessing this is one of the roles that you're filling constantly, and thousands upon thousands of associates like this.
Yeah, it's we fill about 1,600 of these roles a year, and mostly because there's a lot of internal mobility and the roles get more complicated. We also found that a lot of our most senior executives started in this role. So while a lot of people may not think that's a good place to start, we have a history of promoting from within at Fidelity, so it really is a great place to kind of learn the product and start to learn the company as well.
I'm so curious to hear whether you said that one of the ways that you were able to attract more women was by being a little bit less stringent on what you had perceived to be the job requirements. Did that require a bit of an organizational change as well internally?
It did. In fact, the business that we're partnering with, mostly our retail organization, they actually have gone through significant change management. So we give them little clips of change that we then have a whole team that's working on how we're communicating it. And it's been bumpy, but I think we're finally at a point where I know unsolicited at a leadership conference in Florida, somebody actually stood up in the room and said, "I just want you to know I love this new title." Not just for new joiners, but also for people here that we're changing the titling structure. So they're really embracing this idea that they're advocating for their customer.
Sure. I saw on the sort of revised job description that you talk about things like purpose and describing someone as someone who is always looking out for the best interests of others, which I think does really speak to people, starting out in their careers and knowing a little bit about what their soft skills are, but not really knowing where they want to go.
Yeah, I think across the firm, we really put a high importance on making sure that you're listening to customers, that, we're a different kind of sales and relationship organization. And we did little tweaks like looking at individuals with a liberal arts background, not somebody who had only decided that they wanted to business or to sell stocks or to pick the next best stock. So we've really changed the profile of who we think can help our customers. And in return, we're also finding it's a huge opportunity for the employee base as well.
Right. I wouldn't be surprised if, there's the research that shows that men on average are applying to jobs where they feel like they meet 60 to 65% of the criteria. Women tend to wait until they feel like they meet 100% of the criteria. So now by opening it up to liberal arts backgrounds, you're not specifically saying you need a Series 7 in order to be successful here, because part of what you're doing is offering that training opportunity on the job.
Exactly. And we actually have a huge support network to get people through that training process. We've got buddy systems, study groups, online and hard copy of support systems. So we want to make sure that the people that are coming in have a high propensity to pass the exam, and we're making sure that they get peer coaching as well. So it's really important to us as a firm. We don't want people to come and then we realize they're probably leaving a job to come to us. And so putting that first 90 days at risk can be a little bit frightening. So we want to make it as much of a soft landing as we possibly can.
Sure. A colleague of yours spoke a little bit about some of the revisions you made to your associate experience, especially in terms of benefits. And I bet that has had a big impact in your diversity metrics as well.
It has, and it's interesting. We're working really hard to make sure that we're talking about them more. As a private company, we're not very boastful. In fact, we talk about something called the humble brag, where we don't really talk about what we have. But the shift with extending our maternity and paternity benefits, having a personal time off policy versus a vacation and sick day policy, and then lastly, a huge impact is student loan debt repayment, have been huge boosters for how we're really thought about by a potential candidate along the way. So we have recruiters now as well as business leaders, and we're also in the news a lot more than we were talking about these changes that we've made.
Right. I think humble brag it's a good way to try to be as a person, and then as a company you sort of need to brag, right? Because how else are you going to compete a little bit with your peers who are fighting for the same talent?
Yeah, and we find as a company we're actually having to teach leaders how to do this because
Right.
again we've spent so much time not trying to be in the spotlight that being out and talking about ourselves is definitely a change management for a lot of the leaders.
I can only imagine. Great.
I love it, Tara. This has been awesome. I would continue picking your brain all day, but I'm sure you have some networking and some awesome material to go check out. So thank you so much for joining us. This has been great.
Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot, Jill.
Thank you.